Happy Monday. Not sure where you're joining us from today. Let us know where you are joining us from today. My name is Debbie. I am a vibration training specialist. And today we're going to go over some upper body tips, how to tone, how to relax. There's a lot of questions, especially for my ladies, when you start using your vibration machine or want to start using your vibration machine to target above the waist. We're challenged with this for a couple of reasons. The main reason being it's generally not our area of focus. We tend to pay attention to what's inside the jeans, whereas the guys tend to pay attention to it's biology to a degree. So when we start doing or attempting vibration exercises on the plate, very often where we struggle is we just don't have the technique, or it's not something, or it's not something we're doing now. So we don't know what we do to target our triceps, over our shoulders, over our neck. So sometimes if you're not using, there's no right or wrong way to use a vibration machine, but if you're not doing upper body exercises on the ground now, you're doing them in an environment that makes them more effective in less time. So you want the technique to be there. And then there's going to be many of you that perhaps range of motion or mobility restricts you from getting down on the ground and doing those traditional upper body exercises. So I'm going to show you a couple of options on the opposite ends of the spectrum today. We're going to start with those of you that lack mobility or don't have the ability to get down on the ground. To think of today as things to strive for, but I would like you to stay tuned, and I can show you how to use your machine in a seated position. And as we progress into some on the ground stuff, feel free to continue to just take some therapeutic action in a seated position. So I see I have a hello from Sherry from Sacramento. I forgot to say, can you hear me okay? If you can hear me okay, Sherry, just drop me a little heart or I can hear you comment. If you're joining us from elsewhere and you are looking for upper body tips, that's what we're talking about today. Towards the end of the segment, if you do have specific questions, or maybe you're dealing with something structurally where you're challenged and there needs to be a modification, hello, Carmen. There's always a way to use the machine, but sometimes you need to modify based on something that you're dealing with. Perhaps you have a frozen shoulder, perhaps you've got degenerative disc or neck, and doing upper body exercises you avoided because maybe there's a fear or there's a concern. So there's always a way that you can use the machine therapeutically, but we get a little bit intimidated when we get into some of the fitness stuff. Kim Johnson, hi, Kim, you just got your CryoFrost unit today. Awesome. Looking forward to using it. And yeah, there's going to be some tips if your range of motion allows, you can incorporate with that CryoFrost. Tony Potts, looking damn good. Thank you very much. For Monday, I'm kind of surprised myself sometimes. So for those of you just joining us, we're going to break this down into super, super easy ways to get into your vibration machine. We're going to progress to some how I get started on the meter kind of stuff, and then I'll get into some really mean stuff for those of you that want to challenge the chick. And hello, Miss Wilson. So I want to make sure that you're catching my head in this shot. For those of you that have never done a session with me, I always have a bar height or a counter height stool, depending on the length of your legs or how tall you are. An easy way to start using the machine and maybe get a little bit of passive use is seated in a stool. And when you're seated in a stool with your feet on the machine, your feet are raised up off the ground 4 to 6 inches because you're on the machine. So I don't want most of you sitting in a regular chair. I do not want the hips going downhill. So you want to be at a good 90 degree or a little better. So when we progress to things like this for standing exercises, you can use this as a guide. You can use it for safety if you've pushed yourself a little too far. For today, I want to show for those of you that want to get some upper body action, or maybe you just want to move some lymph and some circulation. There's so many ways you can do this seated in a chair. So if you've used your machine in this fashion, what I'm going to get you to do, we're going to be working in oscillating mode because that's my favorite, and it's the most universal type of movement that everyone's using. You can do any of these positions in any of the modes, but understand different movements going to move you in different ways. So there is no right or wrong. There's tolerances, what you like, what you don't like, what feels good, what doesn't feel good. It's going to vary for everybody, especially on the feel good stuff. So just like if you're, maybe we're doing a lower body blast today, we want to warm those legs up. So because we're going to be doing some upper body, we could look at this as a warm-up or a passive way to use the machine. So in a seated position, one of two ways you can use your arms. We're going to put our hands first on our knees. Now, I'm working on a slower speed because it's a little bit easier to see on camera, but I recommend usually a mid-speed if you're starting out, even a little bit higher. The faster you go, the smoother the movement is. The body's got less time to react and guard and protect. But the distance between your feet, I've talked about this in standing poses, but the closer or the further apart your feet are, it's kind of like your throttle on the intensity. If you're really close, you're not moving as much as if your feet are really wide. And when we start incorporating the connection of upper body, it's not so much the tolerance of what your legs can take, but what your tolerance up here can take. So if you're finding at any time any of these positions are just too intense, it's not about slowing the speed down. In fact, you'll find it probably feels worse. Bring the feet closer and reduce the distance to modify the intensity. So to start, just put your feet at about that mid position. Your feet are about hip width apart. I want you to place your hands, the palm of your hands on your knees, and lock up your arms. And you'll start feeling just very subtle movement in the arms, the shoulders, and the neck. If you've got a head sensitivity, you get migraines, you've had recent dental work, if there's any deficiency above the shoulders, please just try to relax. Don't fight and resist it. The body always wants to guard and protect, especially the weak spot, which for most women this is where we carry our stress, our purse, our bra. So just try and relax, focus on breathing, and don't fight and resist it. If you find it's too much on your head already, just make sure you're sitting backwards. Don't be leaning right over, okay, depending on the length of your arms. So this is, for most people, I find tolerated. It's not really that challenging. You're going to get some basic lymph, some circulation, but we've got to walk before we can run. No, I realize this is not a push-up, but it is slightly starting to move the upper arms and shoulders. You will probably find in this one, you can take a little bit of a wider foot position because we don't have a lot of body weight going into the knees at this point. So bring the feet again to that neutral starting point of hip width apart. This time we're going to progress and we're going to bend over and add our elbows to our knees. So it sort of looks something like this. I don't know if you can see my shoulders and my neck shaking on camera. My neck is just past my shoulders, and that's a very important lesson when using vibration machines. You're going to feel this primarily in the shoulder blades. What do you do when you're sitting at your desk and your neck and your shoulders are bugging you? Well, maybe you arch up like a cat. Maybe you roll your shoulders and your neck. I want you guys to be comfortable with experimenting. Move around. All this is a stimulus. And we're attaching you to the stimulus in a way that doesn't require you to get down on the ground to take advantage. So for those of you, like I say, that just lack mobility or have fatigue or just don't want to get down on the ground, this is a really good way to loosen up that upper back, the neck, and the shoulders, even the upper arms at the end of the day. If range of motion is there and you want to get a little bit more intense, the next progression from this would be leaning all the way over. So it depends on how big we are here. But I would recommend leaning, if you're able, lean over and just put your hands on your feet. I'm going to bring this down just a little bit so you can see. There. So you lean over and put your hands right on your feet or even on the edges of the plate. This really depends on how flexible you are. This is not doing a workout. This is not doing major push-ups, but this is, again, you got to walk before you run. So get used to how this feels. The intensity is not terrible. You're going to find, what variation feels good for you if you're starting out. If you're dealing with chronic pain, arthritis, degenerative disc, any kind of deficiency above the waist, this is great to do a couple, 3 times a day. Don't wait until you're so tight or so swollen that it's going to be uncomfortable to do activities to relieve those issues. So let your body be the guide. How often can I use the machine? Whenever your body tells you you need a fix. If you're using it in a feel-good fashion like this, 1 to 2 minutes, really whenever you need some relief, is probably going to go a long way. So the next progression I want to do for upper body exercises, when you guys buy a Life Pro machine, there's all these fabulous things that come in the box with them. So it's not just about getting down on the ground and doing push-ups. There's a lot of things that you can do with the accessories that come with your machine. So the first thing I want to cover is the bands. You've got a set of bands, different colors, different strengths of those bands. But one of the big things that a lot of my seniors deal with is not just arm strength, but grip and hand strength. So if you've ever played, I'm going to date myself, there's a game called Cat's Cradle where you put string on your hands and you do all these little, interconnecting things with your fingers and you pass it off to a friend. We're going to pretend like we're playing Cat's Cradle while we're sitting on the machine. So we're just sitting here while our feet are on the machine. We're getting some great length, some good circulation. It breaks up all the sitting we're doing. And I want you to put your hands in your band, like this. And what we're going to do while we're seated is we're going to go stretch, and we're going to hold that for as long as we can. Maybe I shouldn't say as long as we can, pardon me, 2 to 3 seconds, and we're going to release. And this is what this, so open up those hands, hold 2 to 3 seconds, and release. Hold 2 to 3, and you may not get them as straight or as far apart as me, but I want you to start developing some hand strength, because part of what's going to happen when we get you down on the ground and you're progressing towards that, I want the hands and the wrists to not necessarily start there. I want you to do some exercises and start developing some strength while you're here. Just because you can't put your hands on the machine doesn't mean you can't do strength exercises. So while we're sitting here, we're going to take this and we're going to do Cat's Cradle. So we're going to widen up those hands, hold for 2-3 seconds, and release. Widen up, hold for 2-3 seconds, and release. And you're going to feel that very much on the outside of the shoulders, the biceps, the triceps. If you want to take a variation, and now we're going to put our hands sideways and do that same movement. So it's like we're putting our hands on a table. So it's just a variation. Just by changing the angles of your hands in these bands, you're going to feel different muscle groups. So again, we're going to pull and hold, 2, 3, and release. We're going to pull and hold, 2, 3, and release. Last variation, let's go palms up. So your palms are facing up to the ceiling. We're going to pull these apart, hold, 2, 3, and release. Pull those apart, hold, 2, 3, and release. And you're going to feel a lot of the resistance in the upper arm and the shoulders. So if that's an area you're trying to target and it's just too hard to get down on the ground, or traditional push-ups are hard on the wrists or the shoulders, this is an awesome way. Now, if you want to incorporate a little bit of shake and a little bit of inner thigh toning, you can take those same exercises and hold, 2, 3, apart. Hold, 2, 3, apart. You're going to have different variations. Holding up higher, you're going to feel it more in the triceps and in the underarms. So experiment. You know what areas are weak. You know what areas you want to tone. And just a simple little inclusion that comes with your machine already is really going to ramp up if you learn to start combining these things. I know many of you are probably going, but there's other things. I'm going to take a quick look here. Tell me where you're from. One of my favorite positions. Thank you. Yes, there's a link that Lauren has dropped. If you do not have a vibration plate, or you're looking at the one I'm using, or shopping these things, there's a link there so that you can take a look-see at what different models LifePro offers. These accessories that I'm mentioning today, I'm on the Rumblex 4D Plus unit. All of these come with all LifePro's models. So you get the resistance band. The other thing that's included are your resistance pulley cords. So these, if you've never used them before, there's a little loop and they loop through to the front of your machine. I'm going to have a little look down here so you can see. These are attached on the front of the plate, okay? And what you do with these, depending on what type of exercise you're doing, I always like to show you how they adjust, because sometimes people struggle and don't have patience like me. I don't have patience. But if you look in the middle here, there's a little loop. Okay, and if you're doing a bicep curl, you're going to need less length than if you're like doing a front raise. So there's ways to adjust these. You just push the bottom portion up to shorten it. Okay, and then you adjust it to whatever length it is for the exercise you're doing. But surely for demonstrative purposes, these are attached to the front of my Rumblex. I did this ahead of time as to not look like a bobo on camera. And oh my gosh, Debbie's already talked for 10 minutes. Not possible. Okay, so while I'm sitting here, a lot of my folks are dealing with frozen shoulder, and there's going to be a lot of exercises that you're supposed to be doing, but there's so much more fun to do on a machine, and you're going to get more benefit in less time. So do them on your machine. So let's look at what something like make a front raise might look like. So we're seated, our legs are still getting all the good action they need. We're going to extend these out straight in front of us, and we're going to lift and hold, 2, 3, release. Okay? Lift, hold, 2, 3, release. A lot of people ask me, do you have like a list or a whole, catalog of different upper body exercises? If you Google resistance band exercises or upper body resistance exercises, you'll be looking for days. So these are just a couple of very simple variations. Another one I like to do, I get a lot of tension between my shoulder blades. I like to just try and pull these back, hold, 2, 3, and release. Okay? It's like you're starting the motorcycle. Hold, 2, try and pinch those shoulder blades together, pulling those elbows back, release. Okay? I'm a little bit close to my mirrors, but I thought you could do side raises. 1, 2, 3, release. You are only limited by your imagination. So again, you've got these included with each of your platform. If you've never used them before, my goodness, take them out of the package, attach them, and at least give them a try. They're a great way to wrap up and fatigue the legs too as well for your standing positions, and it's just going to make them a little bit more challenging if you incorporate these while you're doing your standing exercises. So 2 things that come with you with the machine. You've got the resistance band. You've got these with the handles that you can attach to the front of your machine, and play with what works best for you. The biggest thing when you're incorporating these passive tools in the seated position is variety. Just mix up what you're doing. Try extending your durations, and at the same time, start working on exercises that are going to improve that range of motion to get us down on the floor. I will cover those in another segment. We are now going to proceed to the floor. So for those of you that have the range of motion and are doing upper body exercises now, or you're getting down on the ground now and getting up, getting down is never the challenge. It's always the getting back up. So as long as you feel confident, I invite you to join me for the next set on the floor. If you're unable to get down on the ground or don't want to today, you can stay seated in your stool and just continue with us and keep those legs going while I yap here. I'm going to move this over here. They're just too long for me. Oh, Nancy, I was just going over there. There's a way to adjust them, and you're going to want to adjust them depending on the types of exercises. So in this here, you want to push this up, and you can shorten it and adjust it to whatever length you want to use. So experiment with that. Both my red and yellow bands just broke when doing cat's cradle. Then you're stronger than you're giving yourself credit for. If they broke, they're either really, really you're either really, really strong and maybe expanded them beyond. But if you need some help fixing those up, reach out to Life Pro. If that wasn't too big of it, if you've broken them, I'd say you're probably ready to step up to something with a little bit more challenge. Thanks, Nancy. But yeah, no, play with that. Even though I'm a vibration machine expert, I'm not an accessories expert, and it took me a while to figure. When this design came out, I didn't know how to do it either. So I was like tying knots and doing silly things. All right, so upper body. If you are dealing with bad knees, bad hips, there may be exercises in complement, but let's assume those of you that are joining me down on the ground today should be. I don't have the best knees. My floor here is padded, but if you need a little bit of cushion, guess what? This comes with your machine. You get a nice mat. So you can use this on the machine, or if you're starting upper body exercises, I like using it on the floor just in front of the machine. And all we're going to do to start out, as I stated earlier on in the session, it's not about going 100 miles an hour and doing the meanest push-up that you've done in 20 years. If you're not doing basic floor exercises now, you want to focus on technique, getting those exercises proper form. That, if you're going to get down here and do the work, you may as well get the best bang for your buck. So there's a couple of very simple things that once I show you, you're just going to go, oh, that makes so much sense. But sometimes, it's not that obvious because, nobody told you. So how much body weight that you incorporate into the plate is going to determine to a degree how strong the intensity and how quickly you're going to fatigue if we're getting into fitness positions. So the very basic way to start getting used to this, I'm just seated on the ground on this mat, resting back on my legs. Just by putting your hands on the plate, and you can see that I'm leaning away from the platform. very similar to when you were seated on the machine. You're going to feel a little bit of movement into the neck, the shoulders, the shoulder blades. But because the upper body is now more in directly contact with the plate than when we were seated, I'd say it's a little bit stronger feeling, but not very much. This might be, maybe you just want to do some stretching while you're on the machine. Again, you're only limited by your range of motion and your imagination. But to start a basic push-up, what we're going to do is we're going to almost get into like a cat-cow, like we're down on all fours. My knees are, I'm sort of in a box. My knees are on the machine. My hands are on the plate, shoulder width apart. The big secret with whole body vibration and upper body is how to minimize that head shake or that head vibe. The number one reason people have excessive head vibration is you look more like this. So you're putting your hands on the wider edge. There's this mentality out there that the more we shake, the more benefit we get. Absolute garbage. That study does not exist. The wider you put your hands, the more movement you are getting. So I would say there's more intensity. There might be more challenge, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's appropriate for every single body. So I want you to bring your hands more to shoulder width apart. You're going to find in the middle is a little bit more comfortable. The second big trick with upper body is an angle thing with your shoulders and your hands. So if you're looking straight down at your hands and your head is directly above your hands, you're getting the most shake. Vibration just goes straight up. So what I want you to do is unhinge at the hips, lean forward just slightly so that the hands are in line with the shoulders. You can see that in the mirror. And all of a sudden, there's a little bit of movement in the head, but you're going to feel primarily it's in those shoulders and below the neck. And because we tried this on a stool first, we kind of know where we're supposed to be feeling it, and it's not scaring us. Is part of the reason I like you to try it that way first. But in this position, just holding yourself up with your elbows slightly bent. Yes, elbows slightly bent. If you lock your elbow, there's really not a lot of absorption. It's the same reason we recommend bending your knees slightly when you're on the machine in a standing pose. Just unlock those elbows slightly. Keep your hands in line with your shoulders, and you're going to have a much, much more pleasant experience. Probably reduces the head vibe by about 90%. Now, angles is a part 2 topic. So the first part is, again, making sure that those hands are in line with the shoulders and not the head. The second thing is the position of your hands. So the heel of your hand is your contact point. Just like when you're standing on the machine, if the heel of your foot is what transfers it up to your body. So depending on the position of the heel of your hand, I'll give you a variation here. So maybe I'm pointing my fingertips towards each other, and the heel of my hand is facing outward. Elbows are slightly bent, and what you're going to feel immediately is it's a different group of muscles. I feel a little bit more in the chest, up in the higher part of those shoulders and in towards the base of the neck. So just by playing with the angles of your hands and the positions of them, you're going to feel it in different areas of the arms. And then the very last point with the angles is a trick I like to teach a lot of my ladies. The number one area that we try to tone is that lovely bat wing. And not everybody loves tricep dips. I will show you a tricep dip here shortly, but for many of you, it's just too hard of an exercise. And if you don't have the technique or the strength now, I do not recommend doing tricep dips on a vibration machine if you haven't got a little bit of experience doing them on the ground. They're just too brutal on the head. It's not harmful, but what happens is again, we resist and we fight it when we get the sensation to our head, and we become more rigid. When we're more rigid, we're actually amplifying the vibration to our head versus resolving it. So the easiest way to hit those triceps, is you're in a basic push-up position. Your elbows are coming out at a bit of a 45-degree angle, and you'll feel it in the biceps. Take your elbow and swing it in right up against the ribs. Okay? And what you'll feel, instead of being out here, just by pulling them in against your sides, it's all tricep. You'll feel that holding you up on the plate, and that's another reason I recommend starting on your knees. Don't make it harder than you need to. For those of you that are doing upper body now and want to progress to a little bit more actual toning, strength, How much body weight you incorporated is going to make it harder and make it more in the realm of fitness. Much of this that I've been doing now is going to be a warm up for some of you, but for those of you that are dealing with poor mobility and just getting started at upper body, this is a challenge. If so don't beat yourself up if you're not on your toes or maybe having the same durations as the guy next to you. A lot of this is you've got to start and progress depending on wherever you're at and whatever deficiencies you're dealing with. So for those of you that have a little bit more game and are doing push-ups more regularly, the principles are very much the same. So the distance between the hands is how you control the intensity. For true fitness, what you want to start doing is elongating your body. So we're going to evolve from this little box position, and you might back those knees up about 6 to 8 inches, and we're just going to start with a straight torso, okay? So maybe going to the toes is a little bit too challenging, but this is too easy. The more you back your knees up, we're going to reposition those shoulders over the hands. It's a little bit harder. I weigh a little bit more. And then, of course, the next progression would be toes, okay? Now, if you're putting full body weight into it, you're going to fatigue faster than if you were on your knees. If you're dealing with a weak low back or core instability and you're finding that the arms aren't fatiguing, but the low back or something like that might be, maybe continue the rest of your rep or do a little bit more time on the knees. You can do a combination of these, okay? Lots of different ways that you can mix this up. And those same principles apply, maybe we're doing a different push-up. Maybe we're doing a diamond style. Maybe we're doing more triceps like I showed you. So, I want to get more into my triceps. Well, you would come up onto the toes and prop yourself up that way, okay? So that there's, just like squats, there's a bazillion variations on a push-up. You can add weight to your body. You can do shoulder presses where you're getting more body weight going into the shoulders. So whatever push-up you are doing on the ground now likely can be done on the machine with some modifications, but it's critical you understand the two big lessons, which are distance between the hands, just like when you're standing, controls the intensity. And I would recommend a mid to higher speed, just like when I'm standing, unless you're strictly working on balance and stability type positions. With upper body, those really slow speeds can be really choppy and wobbly, just like when you're standing. I think you'll find a mid to higher speed with a more moderate hand position, much more comfortable. It's going to fatigue you faster, and you're going to get to that burn that you might be looking for faster. For those of you that are dealing with poor mobility, but you're able to get down here and you're starting with your upper body exercises, sometimes making a position harder is more effective in fatiguing you faster. And the reason you'd want to fatigue faster in a position like this, maybe you're dealing with wrist inflammation or arthritis. And the more, getting strong and gaining the toning aspects isn't about how long you do an exercise. It's getting those muscle groups to fatigue, to quit. And if your wrists and your elbows and your shoulder joints are quitting before your muscles are fatiguing, maybe making the position a little bit more challenging and being able to reduce your durations, you're going to find that fatigue setting in before the joint pain. So I know a lot of my ladies have issues with the wrists. There's push-up assists. There's different things that you can try to make that upper body easier if it's a challenge for you. But the biggest thing I would do is make sure your positioning is good and push yourself to fatigue fast to reduce the time on those joints. So I promised you a tricep dip. Tricep dips are kind of one of my least favorite positions on the floor. Not because I don't like doing tricep dips, but I hate moving around. I like doing my push-ups. I'm there. I just change the angles of my hands and I'm done. But for a true tricep dip, the biggest tip I can give you you don't want to be sitting really, really far away from the machine. You almost want your low back, resting right up against the base of the machine. Your hands, again, depending on how close or how far apart. So one of the big drawbacks with the traditional tricep dip is it's hard to get your hands close together behind you. A lot of my big guys, that's challenging. And what you may find is you can't bring your hands close enough to reduce the choppiness, but you can give this a try. Bring your feet closer together or closer towards your bum. So instead of, like a push-up, if your legs are all the way out, you're making it as hard as possible, as much body weight. Bring your feet closer together. Keep those hands on the edge of the plate. The fingertips are just tipping right off the edge. And we're just going to lift, okay? And hold. I want those shoulder blades back. I don't want you all slouchy, okay? We're sticking our chest out. And you know, the best way to gauge fatigue on this type of position, if you're starting to feel that the posture's going, you're starting to sag, and you just can't keep a good position, you're done. I'd rather you have a couple of short, effective reps than try to blow off a minute and just have poor technique and be bugging your shoulder or something silly. Okay. Some people like to try seated on the plate. So another way you can do this one is you're going to start with your bum on the plate. Your hands are on either side of your bum, but it does force a bit of a wider hand position. So you can just lift yourself off and try that. You want your elbows slightly bent. If you're finding this is easy and you do these kind of positions all the time, well, put your heels out further. You know, perhaps add some dynamic motion. Okay? But you want to make sure you're keeping a good frame, good strong core. You don't want those shoulder blades sagging. Okay? So that's one way, but I still find I like this way better for the triceps. I don't know. I find with the tricep dip, I actually feel it more on the shoulders than I do the tricep. One very last variation, it's a very hard position. I probably shouldn't have left it as my last exercise. But I want to show you what I call kind of a modified shoulder press. Again, elbows are slightly bent. Hand position determines how much action or how little you're getting. What a shoulder press is going to do is it's going to distribute the weight differently, and we're going to be coming with our upper body down into the machine. So you're going to want to have good tolerance for the head shake. Again, I always stress there is no harm in shaking the head. You know, if that was the case, none of us would be walking or driving cars. But it does take some time to develop tolerance to it. So I want you to, with your neck and shoulders, I want you to be relaxed and hold a good position. Don't resist. Don't fight. Make sure you are breathing. That's the number one thing that tends to happen with upper body. So the position, it kind of starts like a downward dog. Your feet are on the floor. And I want you to push your body forward so that those shoulders are in line with the hands. The elbows are slightly bent. And you're going to feel all this intensity. Okay? Now, while I'm doing this, I love to like turn my head or roll my shoulders. This is one of those positions, again, depending on how strong you are, how conditioned. I would caution quitting just before fatigue on this one. I don't want anybody doing a face plant. Okay? If you're able and you want to go wider, you want more intensity. Again, it really depends on your tolerance. You do dynamic movement. Okay? 3 very basic variations to get used to on the ground. If you're just joining us, again, I can't stress enough, the biggest lesson with upper body is intensity is controlled by your hands, not by the speed. Push your body over so that the shoulders are in line with the hands. You're going to minimize 90 to 95% of the head vibration, and make sure you've got a soft elbow on these types of positions, okay? So those are just a few of my rambling finer points. What I would like to do is just take a quick look and see what questions you may have. Nancy is asking what mode I'm in. I am in oscillating mode, so it moves like a teeter-totter. So we're moving back and forth in that type of fashion. I use the blue. Okay. Nancy, thank you. Both my red and okay. So I'm feeling a little bit tingly in the arms. Summer is, you know, they say that you make summer bodies in the winter. So I know many of my ladies for the new year, the resolution is, okay, I'm going to get back to upper body. I'm going to start toning, you know, putting in the time now so that when swimsuit and short season, certainly in my part of the world, is upon us, it's not an all year thing for everybody. But, you know, it's not just about what you look like in a tank top or your bathing suit. Upper body strength is critical. For a lot of my clients, it's about being more functional, you know, reaching things up off the cabinet, you know, picking your grandbabies up off the ground. You know, it's one of the easiest things to add into your seated positions if you are dealing with poor mobility and you're just using the machine for passive energy circulation. You know, I encourage you to get comfortable with at least adding the elbows and the hands like I did earlier in the segment. There's so many ways that you can start moving and feeling better, and hopefully in the long term progress to some of these more effective, more strength type positions on the ground. But don't overdo it. Like any of my sessions that I talk about, what mode, what speed, what you do isn't usually the biggest factor in what pushes you across that finish line. It's consistent, regular use. So if you've just gotten a machine, the biggest thing I can encourage is, use it regularly, even if it's just in a seated position with your feet on it, or you're sitting on it on the floor for a couple of minutes. Get using it for a couple, 3 minutes, really, whenever your body tells you it doesn't feel so great. Maybe you just lack energy. Maybe you're swelling. I think if you fall in love with the feel good aspects, the toning, the strength, the experimenting with these type of positions becomes more natural because you've gotten used to the stimulation. The biggest reason I find most people don't like or don't stick with regular upper body exercises is, just little tips. They're getting their head shaken too much, or their hands are too wide, and that's what's causing it. So again, the distance between your hands increases or decreases the intensity, whether you're standing or seated on the machine. The heel of your hand is the point of contact. So depending on the position of your hand, that's going to drive the amount of movement. The position of your hand's going to change what muscle groups you're accessing. So experiment with that. Where your tension spots are, where you're trying to tone, whatever it is you're trying to accomplish, experiment with your hand placements and your angles on the machine to target certain areas more effectively. From a frequency or a speed perspective, I always recommend a more modest hand placement, more in line with the shoulders, and a mid to higher speed. I think you're going to find it less wobbly on the head. You're going to find it more comfortable. You're likely going to fatigue a little bit faster, but again, if you're dealing with joint inflammation, you're just getting started out, you're probably going to fatigue quicker, and that's completely normal. How long you would do an upper body exercise is, again, there's never a black and white answer. But for day-to-day use, if you're trying to change your physical body, improve strength, bone density, whatever those goals are, I would say max 1 to 2 minutes per position. So if you're not fatiguing within a 1 to 2 minute period, make that position harder. Perhaps you've been using the same settings or the same exercise for quite some time. So sometimes you've got to mix things up depending on, your body's adapting and getting used to it. Just like lifting weights. If you're doing the same type of exercises with the same amount of weight, you're just maintaining after a period of time. You want to progress and see, more changes, more improvements. What about weights while doing these exercises? Carmen, I'm so glad you asked that. I did a demo Friday with some really cool click weights that Life Pro happened to launch. The Power Flow Pro. I have the 55-pound set. I can't say that I would last long with that, but I love adding weights while I'm on the machine. For two reasons. It's going to fatigue and work those legs a little bit harder. So if weight loss and toning are your goals, that's a really good way to expedite things. But you can physically do some upper body exercises while you're on the machines. If you saw me doing my raises and some of those exercises with the straps, you could even add 5-10 pound kettlebells or hand weights, whatever you have around the house. If the budget doesn't allow for more weights, go pick up a couple of jugs of water or grab a couple of soup cans. There's always something around the house, that you can do to incorporate and continue to add that strength and toning component and take it to better progressions. So thank you for asking that. Nancy, I don't know if I mentioned I am in oscillating mode, but you can do these exercises really in any mode. The distance between the hands or the feet and adjusting that is how we control it in this mode. The other modes, pulsation and lateral, are kind of a fixed setting. So it doesn't really matter where your feet or your hands are on that one. But in the oscillating mode, the intensity is driven by where the hands or the feet are placed on the machine. I use the blue. I'm not quite certain if I'm thinking you're maybe referring to the resistance bands. And there are 4 different ones in the pack. They're going to be different strengths depending on where you're at. You don't necessarily need to start with the hardest, but it really depends on your range of motion. You want it to be challenging, but you don't want it to be so hard that you're having to give up 2 seconds after you try the exercise. The biggest thing is to make sure that you're not just doing the same thing all the time. You're just going to be maintaining. Do I have any other questions today? Who else is out there? I'm just going to go back down to the bottom. Make sure I'm not missing any. Can't wait to hear how Kim's doing with that cryofrost. Lynn is here from Buffalo. Hello, Lynn. Hello, Laura. Both my red bands. We talked about that. There's just too long for me. I hope you figured that one out, Nancy. And there's so many ways you can play with those. So you can even cross them to make them a little shorter. Again, if you're looking, what can I do for exercises with resistance bands? Just do a quick Google search. You are only limited by the number of trainers. There's going to be millions of articles and images come out there. And, sometimes we get stuck in our own head and our own routine, based on our disciplines of the past. It's the only things we know how to do. So sometimes, it's not that we're not creative. We just like to ride that comfort zone because, we look better in the mirror if the technique is there. But I would recommend if you're not doing a variety of upper body exercises, or at least trying the things that come with your machine, you're missing out. There's a lot more benefit that you could be getting. It's not always about doing direct upper body positions that I like to do. Sometimes it's starting and progressing to get to those exercises. And sometimes these are just a great way to mix it up. If you haven't used them on your machine, I think you're going to find that they'll just find they're going to add a new level of stability even on the machine, just incorporating them. And weights, as Carmen mentioned as well. If you've got some hand weights, if you've got the new dumbbells from Life Pro, any of those things can be incorporated into the environment of the machine when you're doing your standing positions. So instead of just standing there, add something, even if you're just flapping your arms like a duck, anything you can do to incorporate it with your existing exercises, you're just going to get more benefit in the long run. So if nobody has any questions for me, I might let you get back to your Monday and your evening and have some supper, depending on where you are. We do this every Monday. Today was upper body toting and tips. And I love hearing where you're from. If you do have challenges and you have some questions that you would like answered specific to upper body, feel free to post these in the feed. And if you weren't able to see the entire session live, we will be posting this shortly after the live. So there's always a recorded copy if you wanted to rewatch it. Maybe you missed one of my ramblings. Maybe you've got a friend that this would be a great idea, something they've been talking about. So the whole point of these videos is to just help you be more effective with the tools that you have. There is no right exercise setting, routine. It's really all up for interpretation, but we hope to give you some ideas to add some new life to your new year and some new results to that list of goals that you guys have been working towards. So thank you so much for joining me. I love doing these sessions with you guys. Don't work too hard, but make sure you work a little bit, and the machine's hopefully going to make that a little bit easier for you. You guys have a great rest of your Monday. Have a great rest of the week. Yes, Sandra, the recorded session will be there later on for you to view. They usually post it on the main page as well as the VIP page within the day of the session, as long as there's no technical issues, but they are always up there. And again, if you did have any questions specifically for me, never hesitate. I am a VIP member in the VIP group. Feel free to tag me if I stuttered or if there was something you didn't quite catch on camera. And there's lots of tools between the VIP page, your group member, your training site. There's all kinds of resources out there. Sometimes we just need a few new moves to dust things off and keep us motivated again. So thank you for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you, I believe, for a launch this Friday. And again, at the very least, I will be here for a workout next coming Monday. Same time, same place. Don't work too hard. Have a great Monday, you guys. Thanks again for